Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer gameplay. This time around, I'm playing as the Dwarves against the Vampire Counts run by 808 Chronics on the Battle of the Cairns map for Total War Quick Match. Now, I will pause shortly because my opponent, the game does start fairly quickly. So for my comp, I decided to do. I'm obviously running dwarves. Dwarves are not one of my most common picks, but I definitely wanted to give them a try against the vampire counts. See what kind of build would work. And I figured that they definitely could do okay against vampires because they're a fairly resistant faction against the vampire counts' main advantages of fear and terror, and they don't tend to break very often. And the runesmiths are definitely a bit of a potent boost, so I definitely wanted to give them a shot. I also wanted to try out the dwarf lord with the the fiery ring of Thori, which causes a bit of a it's a pretty cool breath attack. It's actually one of the few breaths ability slash spells that I think is really pretty solid, especially against squishy infantry. And I know that vampire counts tend to bring a decent amount of squishy units, so I definitely wanted to get a shot by putting it on this lord here. Obviously, backing up my lord, I've got two runesmiths fully kitted out, and they also have the addition. Unfortunately, it's a little hard to show this stuff in replay. They also have the Master Rune of Stormy Redbeard, which increases leadership and melee attack of all nearby units within the 40 meters, which means that basically between the two runesmiths, my whole front line will be getting this bonus. And given that dwarves don't have the best offense stats, this is definitely going to be a tangible buff for them. Now, for my front line, I did a mix of dwarf warriors with great weapons because they're fairly cheap, and then longbeards both stiffen up morale when needed, giving some psychological immunity and solid, near unbreakable defensive infantry. And then on the other end, all the way over here, Warriors of Dragonfire Pass. I do know that vampire counts do tend to bring some regenerating units, so their fire attacks will definitely be solid there. They do have a slight bonus against infantry, so I figured that they could just be a really solid choice. The Dwarf Warriors with great weapons are basically a concession to in name of cost. I did level them up a bit just to improve their melee attack somewhat, and so definitely we're going to be relying on them to dish out some hurt. And they're getting buffed by the presence of the runesmith as well. They're getting a slight armor-piercing buff there. For defending my backline are the Dragonback Slayers, and currently there's no backline, but shortly the range will be withdrawn. I have the unit of Slayers and the Dragonback Slayers. The Dragonback Slayers have a little bit of resistance, physical resistance, which makes them a little tankier. They also have a charge defense against large, which is actually huge because normal Slayers don't have that bonus, and that makes them rather susceptible to large units, even though they're theoretically supposed to be their counter. And here in the front line, I have 3 units of Rangers with great weapons. I wasn't entirely sure if this would be overkill or not, but in the center here we got Ulthar's Raiders, ready to dish out the hurt, and of course make my opponent's units even more susceptible to ranged fire. Unfortunately, Rangers do have rather short range, which makes them susceptible to zombies being dropped behind my lines and just tying them down. So I was a little bit worried about that. I was hoping to get some early pot shots and then withdraw them as quickly as possible. But obviously I had to change that plan as soon as I saw my opponent's build. My opponent in turn ran a mix of skeleton warriors and graveguard with great weapons. You see them intermingled here. I do believe it's skeleton warriors, graveguard on one end, graveguard on the other. So yeah, so it's two units of graveguard on the ends, and then the center made up of skeleton warriors. These are all backed up by the corpse with the unholy lodestone. This does provide his surrounding units with regeneration, and of course a small melee buff. So similar to my runesmiths providing passive support, he does have these unholy lodestones just to provide constant healing and improve his skeleton's melee attack and defense, I do believe. Then he has 2 White Kings, once again provide some leadership bonus because his lord is not actually with his main army, and then 2 units of Cryptors just to provide some bunker busting, I suppose, for against my dwarves, because dwarves do have trouble with large units if they aren't able to shoot them down quickly, and if my opponent is able to drop zombies on top of my ranged units, that will become a huge issue. He does have these Varix Reavers and Manfred hidden over here. I do believe my opponent moves the Varix Reavers out fairly quickly, and I spot them pretty early on. On the other end, he does have a black coach, which could be a problem. It does have a lot of mass, which makes it a little hard for dwarves to shut down. But yeah, definitely going to see how things break down. Now immediately I see my opponent's lineup. I was looking for his lord. I wasn't sure what the lord is, but the lord was actually hidden early on, so I wasn't entirely sure which flank my opponent had hidden his lord on. Interestingly enough, I do believe he mounted Manfred on a horse, which is not that common. You usually see him mounted on like a monstrous creature, like say You either see him mounted on like a dragon, sometimes on foot, and then often you'll see him either foot or on a dragon or on a hellsteed. The horse is probably, I think, the least common mount for vampire counts, because the lords simply don't make that much use out of it. Now, my opponent is immediately pushing forward. Obviously he's undead, so he's got to be pretty aggressive. I do see these flanks coming in with the Black Coach and the Verex Reavers, so I quickly move the Slayers out to cover the flanks here. And fortunately, one of the big advantages of Ulthar's Raiders, or Raiders with great weapons, compared to, say, I'll throw in someone real quick, say a unit of Quarrelers, is they're not immediately visible, so my opponent isn't actually sure where they are, so you can't just rush in and shut them down quickly. Now here, I do try to spread them out a little bit. Unfortunately, I did make a mistake here, and these two units are intermingling a little bit. The fact that intermingling isn't the biggest problem, but because my opponent can drop zombies on them, this makes it much easier for him to shut them down. If these guys were, say, if this unit was further over that side, to the left, this would be much harder for my opponent to shut down. Now what I do immediately here is I move my infantry forward to intercept his push, to tie down his White King. I do believe his White Kings are actually also on horses, which is a little surprising, definitely. I start popping the runes, and now what I do is I order my Rangers. I don't actually pop the Mark of Ulthar, but I do order my Rangers to attack the Crypt Horrors. An Unholy Lodestone will provide healing, but it's better for small units, where it's all the healing is spread out over multiple units. For something large like Crypt Horrors, it's going to be nowhere near adequate. You'd really need an invocation from the heck. My opponent's Lord is not here. So as you can see, they're melting down incredibly quickly. Ranged great weapons don't have a lot of damage output, or sorry, they don't have a lot of ammo, so they can't put out a lot of damage over a extended period of time. But in the short burst term, they're very powerful, and that is actually very good here against the vampire counts. They also fire fairly quickly for a ranged unit. So as you can see, I can quickly melt these Crypt Horrors down, and now I turn my attention to this next unit of Crypt Horrors, knowing that those guys are practically dead. And as you can see, one volley is enough to tear these Crypt Horrors down to almost nothing. So very potent, and it's before all of this is happening before my opponent is able to get zombies into my backline. Now, unfortunately, these Graveguard with Grave Weapons do flank around me, and they start tying down these Slayers. And Slayers are pretty terrible against Graveguard. They don't have, only a third of their damage is armor piercing, and Graveguard have quite a bit of armor. Plus, Slayers have no armor, and they're an infantry, so Graveguard is a significant bonus against them. So simply put, they're just going to melt in the face of these Graveguard. On the flip side, though, the Dragonback Slayers do an amazing job here against the Black Coach, and they're just absolutely melting them down. Now, I'm forced to turn around here with my Great Weapon Armed Rangers. They are being hit by Soul Blight. I'm not entirely sure what the point there was. I guess to drop weapon damage, but it's not... Dwarven weapon damage isn't that great to begin with, and their armor is fairly significant no matter what. But my opponent, right before he gets the charge in, I drop... a Mark of... Well, I do believe I dropped the Mark of Ulthar. I thought I dropped Mark of Ulthar on Manfred and immediately started dropping his HP. He should be able to heal himself, but if I am able to drop his healing a little bit, every little bit counts. And I do get some axes into him, so definitely win there. Unfortunately, Ulthar's Raiders are getting melted down, but they are a fairly cheap unit, so it's not like I'm losing that much there. These ranged with Grave Weapons do get run over by the Black Coach. Definitely not, doesn't make me happy, but not much I could have done there. The Dwarf Warriors with Grave Weapons are breaking despite the fact that Runesmith support. The Runesmith is popping. I'm popping runes almost on cooldown. I think I was fairly on top of those. Fortunately, I'm not really making much use of the ring of the ruby ring here, because my opponent's squishy infantry is already practically wiped out. All that's left are his monstrous units, his heroes, and the Graveguard. And the Graveguard is pretty resistant to the ring, and it's not even worth mentioning the Verex Reavers or heroes. It simply doesn't do very much to them at all. Now, unfortunately for my opponent, the Verex Reavers, despite regeneration, are getting melted down fairly quickly by the Great Weapons, but my opponent does drop these zombies, and you can see the zombies tie down the Rangers with Great Weapons. Unfortunately, the fact that Rangers with Great Weapons dish out a lot of hurt very quickly means that while zombies do, of course, shut them down, it's nowhere near as bad as, say, as a unit that needs a long time to work its DPS. Even a few bursts, even like 1 or 2 volleys from Rangers with Great Weapons before those zombies go up is enough to do damage. And over here you can see my Runesmith is tying down these Crypt Horrors. It's not the ideal situation for him. It's not that great for them either, though. And he's popping his Rune of Negation over here. And these Warriors with Dragonfire Paths are absolutely holding their ground here. Graveguard is being hit by Rune of Wrath and Ruin. The skeletons are slowly dying. My opponent's pulling the Unholy Lodestone away. I do pop a Ruby Ring here, and it actually does some huge amounts of damage to the Graveguard. It practically destroys these Skeleton Warriors. It probably damaged my Warriors Dragonfire Pass a little bit, but not too much. Nothing too significant. Over here, I'm trying to deal with the Wipe Kings. I'm trying to pick out my opponent's heroes. He has a lot of single model units on the field. The Black Coach has already gone down, I do believe, somewhere in the middle of the fight over here. Not entirely sure where. The Crypt Horrors or the Lodestone are getting into my range with Great Weapons, which is getting really mauled. But my Dragon Max Slayers are in there. They are getting some armor buffs, and they are simply destroying these Black Knights. They're simply destroying the White King. They're actually dishing out quite a bit of hurt there. Longbeards are tying down these Graveguard. They will not do particularly well against them. Graveguard do hit really hard, but Longbeards are cheaper, and they will just hold them down for a long time, which is all I'm really concerned about. The Runesmith is dying to the White King. The White King obviously hits pretty hard and is definitely pretty tanky, pretty hard for the dwarves to deal with, but slowly the White King is being picked apart and eventually will fall. This is actually kind of an ideal situation for my opponent. When all his units are clustered up like this, an Overcast and Heck can easily get maximum value. Unfortunately for me though, most of his units are already fallen apart, and that means that now my Dwarf Warriors with Grey Weapons get back in here and start doing damage. I have to pull my Runesmith back. I don't want to lose them just yet. The spells are great. Rangers with Grey Weapons are throwing axes down here at the Unholy Lodestone. Actually, I might have ordered him to target the Crypt Towers. I'm not entirely sure what I ordered him to target here. I don't know if it'll tell me if I mouse over. But they're dishing out a lot of hurt there. My opponent drops another unit of zombies. Fortunately, zombies are very cheap. They only cost 3 wings of magic. But when it's a cluster up like this, an Overcast Invocation of the Heck can easily get huge value and heal most of this stuff up. Another the Rune of Wrath and Ruin is doing absolutely great work against these Graveguard. Is definitely helping even the playing field for my Longbeards and my otherwise somewhat weak units against them. I still have a pretty healthy unit of Graveguard. Some healthy units of Longbeards. So I do feel pretty comfortable with this game at this point. My Rangers are coming back into the fight. Over here, the Graveguard finally goes poof. And this Runesmith is dying. Both of my Runesmiths are pretty mauled, but my Lord still has both of his potions. He did have both a potion of toughness and a potion of foolhardiness. So he's definitely holding his own. He's slowly beating Manfred down. Manfred will die, even with Undeath Resurgent popped. The Corpse Card with Unholy Lodestone is not healing him anywhere near enough. I'm not entirely sure if my opponent has actually popped any Heck. I don't know if he's really made use of the Heck. It's a very solid pick. Zombies over here are tying down the ranged with their weapons. They're very cheap. 3 rings of magic is simply a pain. Painfully spammable. But these Graveguard, despite in the Heck, are melting down. I don't believe my opponent got an Overcast. Actually, he did get an Overcast in the Heck, so but it's too little too late. And my opponent's unit simply disintegrate. The only thing left at this point is the White King, and he will shortly just fall apart. The zombies, of course, are there, but the zombies, some zombies can't win the fight alone. And I do believe my opponent decided to leave at this stage. I don't think it was actually quite done, but that's okay. It was kind of decided there. So I think this was definitely an interesting game. I think it shows some important things to consider with dwarves when you're dealing with vampire counts. It does definitely show the importance of timing. My opponent's timing was a little bit off, and the fact that he pushed in a little late with his cavalry contingent and the Black Coach. The fact that the Black Coach got caught up by the Slayers definitely meant that he didn't get as much value out of his. It meant that he didn't get full value out of it. Like if he'd gotten a full surround on me there, he would have done much more damage. Instead, I kind of managed to deal with at least the center of his army, which let my Rangers flee through the middle of the fight there. Once he came pushing through. So definitely, the Lord was not a bad pickup for me. I think. Unfortunately, I wasn't on top of casting his abilities. I definitely cast the ring a few times. I think twice that game. And I did pop, but I didn't really make use of Stand Your Ground. I kept forgetting to use it. I was more focused on using the Runesmiths constantly. The Runesmiths, Rune of Wrath and Ruin, and all their buffs to damage, their buffs to melee attack, their Runes of Negation, their the armor increase, everything was just doing a huge amount of work. They were just stiffening up this whole front line. That would have otherwise probably fallen apart somewhat quickly at some of these units, especially the Cryptars and the Graveguard. Dwarf Warriors and Longbeards, obviously, it's important to take some of these figures with like a grain of salt, because my opponent dropped a lot of zombies. Zombies are chaff units, but obviously they all count as a kill. And those are probably made up a significant amount of these losses. As you can see, my opponent brought a smaller army than I did to the field. So that's something important to consider. The Longbeards definitely held their ground, though, pretty solidly. So did the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass. They are, in fact, I do believe, a little more expensive than Longbeards, but I did like the idea of some anti-infantry damage and that fire damage, so I decided to take them. The Slayers, this unit of Slayers got caught by the Graveguard, and they're absolutely atrocious. They're not a particularly good unit against Graveguard. They're not a really good unit against heavily armored infantry in general. They're mostly meant to deal with cavalry, especially or squishier units like squishy monsters. So definitely a bit of a glass cannon unit. And they simply couldn't perform against the Graveguard with weapons. They just got destroyed. But the Dragonback Slayers, definitely they destroyed the Black Coach or released most of its health. They definitely helped pincer both Manfred and the Varix Reavers. and tear them to bits. They helped tear to bits the crypt horrors, and of course a bunch of zombies that got in the way. So definitely these guys dished out a lot of hurt when they were set up against their optimal targets. And in the meantime, the ranged great weapons, all of them dished out amazing. It's important to consider what units were the ones dying here. These guys even managed to gain a chevron. They were absolutely destroying my opponent's large targets. And while on paper, ranged with great weapons might not look as good as, say, Thunders, because their ranges were incredibly short. Their ammo is incredibly limited. And they have practically no armor. They have no shields. They're a very squishy unit. They do have a few very significant advantages against vampire counts, as you saw, because of the zombies. Once the zombies go in, your ranged units are practically worthless. And the fact that the rangers with great weapons do very high damage per shot, and they can get a lot of shots off fairly quickly. They fire, I think, faster. I do believe faster than the rangers with normal crossbows. So while hitting harder, so they can get a lot of damage out very quickly, especially with Mark of Ulthar going down on their opponent to debuff them against ranged fire. And so they can dish out an incredible amount of hurt very quickly, just melt the unit down before the vampires are able to shut your range down with fire. And if you're able to spread them out more, and that was definitely a mistake I made there, my ranges were too clumped up. It was a little hard on that map because the map's pretty... I was fighting around a choke point basically, and that limits my options with the rangers. But they were definitely able to dish out a huge amount of hurt. And if they'd been more split, they probably would have been able to do even more damage. Their biggest disadvantages are obviously range and low ammo count. But if in a short burst, to melt down a lord, a large monster, a group of monsters, infantry, cavalry, that sort of thing, they're incredibly potent. Especially with the support of Ulthar's Raiders. Now for my opponent, he brought, I think, a fairly normalish build for undead. The two White King, the Lodestones, I think were an interesting pick. I think this was largely because of the way he wanted to execute his plan against me. I think because he planned to just tie me down in the front and then recharge me with the Black Coaches and Manfred and Varix Reavers. He wanted to just he wanted something healing his front line. And unfortunately, it didn't quite work out for my opponent, but the Corpse cards with the Unholy Lodestone definitely will support Skeleton Warriors and Graveyard fairly well. They will keep them alive for a very long time. The one unit that got tied down fighting Warriors of Dragonfire and some, I think, great weapon armed dwarves, the one unit of Graveguard who fought them, actually performed fairly effectively with the support of the Corpse cart with the Unholy Lodestone, because it was simply keeping him alive for an incredibly long period of time. Black Coach didn't get too much done. He got caught by the Slayers. I think my opponent might have lost track of it, and by the time it got clear, it was a little too late. It just got melted down very quickly. All the units of Cryptars, as you can see, got practically nothing done. They just got focused by the Rangers and deleted. The other unit got a little more damage done, but they also took a huge amount of hurt very early from the ranged great weapons. It was only the fact that my opponent's cavalry was coming up on my rear that forced me to change targets with the Rangers. The White Kings definitely helped stiffen up the front line. They were definitely helping trying to shut down the Runesmiths. It does a little hard to shut down the Runesmiths. They're not the worst melee combatant, and they have a lot of obviously their spells affect them as well, so with their abilities. The Skeleton Warriors are a very weak pick. They're a chaff unit. I don't know if I wouldn't necessarily call them the wrong pick here, because as cannon fodder to shield his Graveguard, they definitely did a solid job. But they're not really able to dish out the hurt to any dwarf units. Not even dwarf warriors with great weapons who are fairly squishy. Only Slayers might be a little susceptible, or maybe the Rangers, but they're usually fairly safe from this sort of engagement. Varix Reavers did a decent amount of damage, despite taking a huge amount of hurt in their initial right as they were charging in. So yeah, those are definitely some decent unit picks for my opponent. The Graveguard with weapons, of course, did great. It looks like they did gain a chevron here, this unit. So definitely not a bad pick. I definitely think my opponent's build was pretty solid. I think the timing was simply a little off, and that ended up costing him a bit. I definitely I do think this dwarf build is an okay choice against undead. Especially the combination of the Runesmiths and the Rangers with great weapons to shut down enemy monster units very quickly, or enemy lords very quickly, I think is a very potent combo for dwarves. Like I said, I definitely it was a good game. Definitely thanks to my opponent for the fun match. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to leave a like or subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, or would have any questions or requests about what units or army comp you'd like to see me showcase in the future, do feel free to post those down in the comments. And I will be sure to read them and respond as quickly as I can. I appreciate you all for watching, and bye for now.